My friends, today we're looking at some practice videos of the community of this awesome YouTube channel again to analyze some mistakes and bad habits when it comes to working on the exercises that we're discussing on here. I'm sure you will see yourself in a lot of these clips, so you might get that one thing, that one tip that changes everything right here in this video. So let's dive in right away. So we have some legato speed bursts right here from Alexander, and I really like how close the fingers are to the neck. I think it's very beneficial to work with two strings here, because you're not just training hammer-ons and pull-offs on one string, you're training that tricky transition, which makes it much harder. The hammer-ons look and sound pretty good most of the time already. With the pull-offs it would be great to see a bit of a snapping movement. That movement gets very small with those faster tempos, but I feel like sometimes you don't hear the notes clearly because the fingers are more lifted from the neck instead of snapped like that. This is a really cool workout when it comes to mastering string transitions with the alternate picking movement right here. What I love is that you can see the movement coming from the wrist right here. It's pretty much impossible to play phrases like this with a very stiff technique, so that's the perfect workout when it comes to further unlocking the wrist, and it sounds and looks really good already. You can hear a little bit of string noise here and there, so it might be interesting right now to analyze where it's coming from exactly. The one thing I can see is that the thumb is kind of locked in place right here, slightly peeking across from behind the fretboard. So if the noise is primarily coming from the fingers, it might help to follow the shapes with the thumb a bit so you get the same technique for every single string. But since the main focus right here is the picking technique and you can see a really nice wrist movement right here, I feel like it's definitely going into the right direction. Nice. Always happy to hear some really cool melodies in the group as well. The question is, any tips for turning melodies into riffs? The one thing that always helps me the most is figuring out what key that I'm actually in, so that when you play the notes of the individual melody, you can see the chords for every single note of the melody. That way you can easily transition from chord or interval into a couple of melody notes, next chord, etc., so that you don't just end up with single notes. Nice, we have some really nice chord transitions here already from the beginner course. So the goal with the fretting hand right here is to nicely transition from one shape into the next, and it already sounds really good. The one thing I could see with the picking hand is kind of a time-keeping movement in between. It's something I wouldn't recommend doing with the picking hand because there's a lot of kind of unnecessary movement that way. But actually tapping the foot in order to stay in time is perfectly fine, especially for practicing. So it might be really helpful to switch that movement from the picking hand to maybe the right foot, for example. Nice! So this one made me really happy because there's pretty much close to no string noise right here. Sounds very clean. You can see the relaxed picking, the relaxed fretting hand as well. That sounded very good. And it's an especially tricky workout because you're switching between faster and slower note values right here. And you want to be in time right after each switch. So you don't want to kind of rush into the slower notes or drag into the faster notes. So technique-wise, I think this looked really good. Oh, we got some wah. Nice. I personally on my end like a bit of wah. I especially like to use it live. So I think we should bring wah back. It has kind of got a bad reputation over the years. I think it's awesome. This already sounds pretty good. This is very fast, quite advanced. Alexander is always pushing himself, which I'm super happy to see, getting better every single week. The one thing I can see right here is naturally when things get faster, it gets tough for your fingers to hit the string exactly where you want to hit it, which is very close to the fingernail. So sometimes right here I could see the fingers kind of pressing down with the more fleshy part of the fingertips. which is completely normal when you push yourself outside the comfort zone. It's just something I would watch out for while building my technique further, but this is already very promising, awesome to see. Now this sounds really great as well. Love the focus on rhythm and on cleanliness, so getting every single note to sound nice and clean right here. What I can see a bit is that the movement is coming from the arm mostly. I do see that the wrist is not completely locked, so it's not a movement like this. But I feel like having the wrist moving a little bit more will make the string transitions a bit easier. And when it comes to the pinky right here and getting it to stick closer to the neck, I feel like once again thumb position could solve this easily, because the thumb is kind of dislocated, it's right here and the fingers are right there. So if the thumb supports the fingers from behind the neck and the angle is changed from this right here to a more straight angle like that, that also really helps out with technical exercises like that. But this already sounded great, especially for 1 week results. Very, very impressive. This sounds great as well. So I really like the picking technique right here. You see the wrist is super relaxed. The notes sound really nice. You have quite some attack on them while still just using the wrist for picking. If there's ever an issue with the fretting hand, I feel like the thumb could follow a little bit more, because right now it's always on top while the fingers are moving to the highest and back to the lowest string. So if this is ever causing some inconsistencies or maybe feels weird to play on the higher strings, just try following it along. That could lead to even cleaner results, but this is super impressive, very clean. Nice to hear the Enter Sandman riff with some wah. Already got the right sound for it, I would say. The one thing that really helps out with hitting the exact right string all the time is placing the picking hand on the bridge. So every time I work with more of a floating approach, it's only to play full chord voicings. But hitting individual strings with an arpeggiated riff like this gets really hard if the hand is disconnected from the guitar. So I feel like just this one detail will result in more control right away. Nice! That sounded really great. If you listen to both the repetitions, I love how the second one sounded better immediately. The one thing that's often not paid attention to is correct note spacing. So with the first repetition, you could hear kind of a shuffle rhythm. It didn't really sound like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, a little bit like that. But with the second repetition, the note spacing sounded much, much nicer. And since there's primarily a focus on rhythm right here, I feel like this is already showing really great results. And as described right here, the focus is on smaller movements while maintaining picking attack. I can definitely hear the picking attack right here, although the movements look very relaxed. So I would say when it comes to that, mission accomplished. Nice to hear some riffs in here as well. The one thing I can see right here when it comes to the picking technique is something we haven't seen yet. There's some movement with the fingers while there's some picking, especially with the string transitions. So if you look closely at the thumb, you can see that it's not really the wrist that's following the strings, it's more the fingers that are bouncing and jumping around like this. This can lead to some inconsistent results because you will never really hit the strings the exact right way if your fingers are always moving and changing the angle a bit. So I would recommend going with a more stiff approach like that. Stiff not meaning like clenching your fist and making sure that your fingers stay in place. Mine are very relaxed, but they hit the strings at the exact same angle for every single string, because I'm always following the strings like this with my entire hand. So I get the same picking angle for every single string instead of kind of reaching for the strings with my fingers like this. I think it's a very small, subtle change, but it might have a huge effect, especially when it comes to riffs like this. Nice. Awesome, that sounded really great, especially impressive when it comes to playing it with a clean tone and standing up, so not exactly making things easier here. And what I like is that you can see what I described earlier when it comes to following the strings. We can hear very consistent results all across the guitar because the picking technique looks quite similar, comparing all the strings right here and moving through all of them. That's my favorite part of this clip. Question right here kind of concerns the uncontrolled pinky. I personally think it's not that bad most of the time. You can see it curling a little bit like this, which also happens to me sometimes when I'm working with legato. When it comes to picked scale phrases like this, I feel like mine is relatively close to the neck all the time, or at least that's what I'm trying to do. So when it comes to getting more control of the pinky, it also really helps out to have some dedicated legato workouts in the practice routine where you don't think about your picking, you're just attacking the strings once and all the rest of the notes are played with hammer-ons and pull-offs, and especially focusing on that pinky finger to kill that bad habit. But when it comes to the picking and overall sound and cleanliness right here, awesome job, I really like it. Nice, so I really like this practice approach of really kind of punishing yourself, only using the fretting hand to generate these notes. It already sounds really good. You have the neck muted right here, which is technically helping out a little bit, of course. But the one thing I can see right here is that the notes are kind of generated by hammering on every single fret like this. So it's not really a pull-off and hammer-on movement like this. That's quite smooth. It feels like every single note is kind of violently hammered on the neck. That might be where the elbow pain is coming from, which is described here in the post. I can't bend my fretting hand elbow without horrible pain, so if the pain consists, I would definitely go see a doctor and not just push through it. It's definitely not worth it to hurt yourself, with permanent injuries especially. So I feel a more relaxed movement and really focusing on that snapping movement instead of generating the notes while really hammering on the neck like this would really help with staying more relaxed and avoiding injuries like this. So even for very fast legato, the movement can look like this and it never really has to look like that. Nice, this is one of the hardest exercises. I'm always happy to see it, and especially playing it with a clean sound is very, very challenging. It sounded really great. The one thing you could see right here, which is the trickiest aspect of the exercise, is that it kind of has a sweep/economy picking approach. And for those down strokes, you could often see those individual picking strokes a little bit. So that's the thing I would focus on right here, kind of eliminating those picking strokes and just basically letting gravity do the work most of the time. That makes it much easier to speed up the exercise. But aside from that, very impressive for sure. Nice. This sounds really good. And I like the relaxed approach, and the curl of the fingers is very clearly visible. One thing we can see right here again is although the fingers are playing on the highest string, the thumb is still on top of the guitar like this. So since the main goals described right here are hand synchronization and string noise, I feel like that could really help, just following the fretting hand fingers to avoid the noise that's sometimes coming from them. And when it comes to pain in the picking hand, playing fast should never hurt. So please always make sure to stop as soon as you feel like there's something wrong with the picking hand. I can see the picking movements are relatively big right here. So one thing that always helps with building speed is just making them a little bit smaller. You can play very, very fast if your picking movements are small like this, compared to speeding up a very big motion like that. That might result in some pain here and there. But overall, the foundation is really, really good. So I feel like that's an awesome starting point right here for sure. Nice, that sounded really good. That's a very, very challenging exercise. Once again, clean sound. Always happy to hear that. So one thing when it comes to higher speeds, since it's mentioned right here, higher speeds just aren't clicking at the moment. I can see that the string transitions are mostly looking like this. So the strings are followed by the picking hand, but it's kind of an arching movement like this instead of following the strings like that. That means that the picking angle for the D string, for example, will look very different compared to the picking angle on the high E string, because you're following the strings like this and not like that. So that might help with more consistency, but aside from that, really great results. It's a very, very tricky one. Nice. So I also love to see exercises from the rhythm course right here. I love how you can see the wrist moving, so it's not coming from the whole arm, which is always great, but you can see kind of a bouncy movement like this. When the goal is to speed all of this up, I feel like going for more of an up and down movement like this instead of a bouncy wide movement like that always helps quite a lot. So if you kind of see it more as up and down instead of sideways bouncing like that, that will really help with building speed. But it's always great to see the wrist activated at this level. Already the perfect starting point when it comes to that. Alright my friends, those are the practice clips that stood out the most to me this week. If you want your playing on this channel, just click the link down below, join a membership on Patreon with Discord access, and I will review your practice clips next. Until then, have an awesome day. Bye bye.